Welcome to the Wonder Cinema Podcast,
where we wonder about cinema.
I'm filmmaker and film critic Brian Henry Martin.
And I'm cinema historian and author Dr. Sam Manning.
Welcome to Series 2, where we'll be wondering about the remarkable story of home video in Northern Ireland.
The rise and fall of videotape, from format wars to video nasties, piracy, paramilitaries, and the wonder of the video shop.
So we want you to
say yes to VHS.
Welcome to episode 4. And Sam, we are pressing pause. But why are we pressing pause?
We're pressing pause, Brian, to look at the ways that cinema and television had to fight back against the rise of home video and the ways that they upped their game in order to compete with this new medium.
Okay, so when video arrived, it was a threat to television and cinema. But let's start, Sam, with TV. How was video a threat to TV?
Well, I think to answer that question, we just need to look back at the period before video came in. So in the mid-1970s, if you wanted to watch a film on television, you only really had 3 options. There were 3 channels, which were BBC One, BBC Two, and Ulster Television, which was the franchise here in Northern Ireland.
I remember it well, 3 channels, and television didn't start until midday, and it was over by 11 o'clock at night. So it was actually even a small window of television. But there were movies on television, and I certainly saw a lot of great films on TV. But what was the threat of video to cinema?
Well, obviously direct competition in the fact that you could firstly either record films from television, or you could rent, or less likely you could buy them from a local video dealer. At this point, there were only limited options to go to the cinema. Cinema going had been in long-term decline since its peak in the 1940s and 1950s, to the extent that by 1978 there were only 5 cinemas left in Belfast. In the last series of The Wonder Cinema, we learned how the ABC was bombed in 1977 and closed, and that left the New Vic, the Avenue, the Curzon, the Strand and QFT, Queen's Film Theatre, in Belfast at that time.
And they were all single screens, so you weren't being offered a huge variety of films at this point. But Sam, the thing about this world is it was actually quite boring. I remember a childhood of frustration and boredom because you as a consumer were at the mercy of TV schedules. So if you wanted to watch a film on television, you had to see it in the room live. You had to be there. And if you missed the beginning or the ending, that was it gone. I mean, I remember one traumatic event, Sam, staying up late beyond my bedtime to see West Side Story. That's quite a long movie. And halfway through, being gripped by this Oscar-winning musical, being told that I had to go to bed. And I was like, no, wait. But if I miss the ending of the film, when will I ever see it again? I mean, that sounds mad now, but it could be years. And at that moment in time, it literally could have been years or never at all. Like, when were you going to see this film again? So I went to bed weeping that I would never see the end of West Side Story.
And have you seen the ending since?
I've never seen it. No, I did, of course. But I know people wanted to see films. I mean, I remember hearing of Citizen Kane. And if you waited for Citizen Kane to either turn up on television at that time or in the cinema, it could be years. It could be 5 years before that cycle came round again. So you were really at the mercy of all of that. And then, Sam, the blank video changed everything. It honestly changed everything.
Yeah, and even if you wanted to see a film again at the cinema, you then had to rely on it to be re-released. And that only happened for certain films. So, for instance, a classic like Gone with the Wind, first released in the late 1930s. Belfast viewers had to wait until the 40s. But then it might be shown every 5 years or so, and that's a long time to wait if you want to see your favourite film again. Even you're at the mercy of external events happening. So, for instance, I've read that there was an ITV strike in 1979. UTV actually closed down for a few weeks, which meant that you wouldn't be able to watch any films that might have been shown then. So
you're down to 2 channels.
You're at the mercy of other things happening, where the blank videotape really marks a shift in control. You are controlling what you can record and when you watch it.
And along, as you say, came the blank video, and we were able to record programs from the television. And I mean, I think this was, an amazing moment. And this was really the selling point of video from the very beginning. You can record from the television.
But when video came out, that wasn't necessarily a cheap thing to do. So I've gone back through some of the local newspapers and looked at the prices of blank VHS tapes at that time. So in October 1980, if you went to Tapes and Records in Warren Point, how much do you think a blank 3-hour VHS might cost you, Brian?
Oh, what year again?
1981.
1981. It was $150 to hire a videotape per night. It was £5 to get ET as a pirate video. So a blank tape, I'm thinking, would be £6.
Higher. $9.99.
Oh.
So $9.99 for a single tape, which is obviously very expensive at that time. But that price goes down dramatically through the 80s and 90s. For instance, by 1985, if you went to Radio Rentals in Portadown, you could get 2 3-hour tapes for $7.95. By December 1990, if you went to Pound Stretcher in Newton Abbey, you could get 3 3-hour tapes for $2.99. And Brian, by 1998, SuperValue had a special offer selling 3-hour tapes for just 79p.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen. But one of the key components of all of this, Sam, was the VCR, the video recorder, because what it allowed you to do was to set a timer. So you could tape things in the middle of the night, or when you were on holiday, or if you were going out for the evening. So you never had to miss anything again. The timer really opened up a whole spectrum of things to record that you never would have seen. Part of the ritual of the blank video, Sam, was obviously the tapes themselves and the stickers that came with the tapes, and being able to label the tapes yourself and to write on, and I would have one that said Brian's tape. And no one else is allowed to use that video but me. Everyone in the family would have one tape that they were allowed to use. But then, of course, as you say, over time, when the prices of these tapes fell, you didn't record over stuff again. You kept stuff. And you built up your own video library until people had hundreds of videos at home that did tape themselves, recorded. And, you almost had a video shop in your front room. I mean, that's what was happening to people at this time.
Yeah, and if you remember back to our previous episode on piracy, you handed me the copy of E.T. in a video library faux leather case. So there are even ways to present these to make them look, I don't know, more respectable, or, to fit in with what else you had in your living room. They were meant to look like the spines of books. You could hide the fact that you had this video collection in your house.
So, Sam, I mean, I have categorized life before video as a wasteland filled with boredom and hopelessness if you missed your favorite film or TV show. But what were the choices at the time, any time before video?
Yeah, so I've picked a random day from 1978, the 5th of August. So only a very small number of people would have had VCRs at that time. but this is what the ordinary person could have gone and watched if you were living in Belfast on the 5th of August 1978. If you went to the New Vic, you could have watched The Deep. If you went to the Avenue, you could have seen Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. The Curzon and the Strand were actually showing the same film, so your choice was even limited again, which was Gone in 60 Seconds. QFT, Queen's Film Theatre, was closed for the summer at that point. Thankfully, now it's open all year round. If you didn't want to go to the cinema and you wanted to stay at home, so on BBC One they were showing Charlie Chaplin in Triple Trouble. Later in the day, you could watch Rio Conchos. BBC Two had Thunder in the Sun, and then had a late night double horror bill of White Zombie and House of Wax. So there is quite a decent choice there. But then if you think once VHS became mainstream and you could walk into your local video shop, you could choose from 500 or 1,000 different films, that's a big step up, isn't it?
It's a huge step up. I mean, even on that day, the 5th of August, you're still only talking about 10 films that are available. And as you say, you walk into a video shop and you've got 500 or 1,000 films that you can watch, as well as those films, as well as the films that you have recorded the previous week on videotape. So, you know, the amount of films that you were able to consume, you know, was just incredible at that moment.
Yeah, and there are also films that perhaps aren't available in the cinema. So some of those video nasties that we spoke about would have never been shown in the cinema. So you're perhaps watching them for the first time. Also, pirate copies of films, you know, this idea that you might be watching E.T. at home on a pirate copy rather than going out to the cinema to see it.
Video would obviously have a huge impact on television. I mean, the viewing figures for television programs at this time, you know, you had mainstream programs on a Saturday night, like The Generation Game or Morecambe and Wise or Dad's Army. You know, we're getting 20 million plus viewers, huge numbers that today they could only dream about. And video coming along was the beginning of that starting to fracture. You know, there's no doubt about that. And then obviously we got 4 channels. In 1982, Channel 4 came along, and Channel 4 came along with a very different mission statement to bring new voices and just be an alternative to the other 3 channels.
Yeah, so Channel 4 comes in 1982, like you say, as having a remit of representing underrepresented audiences, showing things that are different from the current programming on BBC and ITV. And that's really influential because it opens up programming to a different type of film. It's not just blockbusters or older classics.
And Channel 4 were obviously going to also push the boundaries of censorship and what could be shown on television. Do you think that was a kind of direct reaction to what was happening on video? You know, the video nasties had obviously just blown the censor apart with, you know, what people could see at home. The idea of television, you know, all of a sudden now doing a similar thing. And the Red Triangle films, Sam.
Yeah, what were the Red Triangle films, Brian? I think this is more your generation than mine.
So the Red Triangle films were 18 certificate films that Channel 4 decided to show post-midnight. In 1986, they would show a season of these films, many of which had never been seen in the UK before. The first film that they screened in this was a French cannibal film called Themrock. So there's the cannibals back again. So that's got a video nasty feel about it. Now these films, post-midnight, were getting 2 to 3 million viewers. I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? I wonder how many of those viewers were watching live, or were they using the timer on the VCR? But it was having a massive impact. And I remember the thrill of seeing a Red Triangle. It was supposed to be a content warning. It was a red flag to say, hey, don't watch, kids. it was quite the opposite. It was it was a big red beacon of come watch, kids. So we were really excited by the Red Triangle films. But of course, someone who was not enamored was Mary Whitehouse. And the National Viewers and Listeners Association, who of course thought this was another moral panic.
Yeah, which is unsurprising given what we heard about in the previous episode, isn't it?
So unfortunately, the Red Triangle films were short-lived. I think they only screened 10 in the end, but the significance of them, I think, went way beyond that, because I think they did open a door into 18 certificate films being shown on television.
And the fact that people recorded those off the television and probably shared them at the time. I mean, like you said, I'm inferring here, but it seems like this scheduling of putting them on at midnight or even later is a direct response to the video, that they know that even if people aren't able to stay up late, although I'm sure many people did, if that isn't an option for them, they can potentially record them off the television, watch them later, share them with other people at a later time. But Brian, there was a place in Belfast that was already showing alternative films, the kind of things that might be shown on Channel 4, even some of the Red Triangle films, and that was Queen's Film Theatre, locally known by QFT, I would say, by most people. So this was a cinema that opened in 1968, just as the Troubles was kicking off, with the remit of showing the best films from around the world. It opened in what was a lecture theatre on the Queen's University campus and had been doing its job very successfully since the late 1960s, with a few setbacks. It was potentially going to be closed down in the 1970s, but survived. So didn't that already do a very good job of showing people films that they wouldn't be able to see elsewhere?
The challenge that all cinemas have is to get people to leave the house. I mean, they have that challenge today, and QFT always had an air of mystery about it. It was in a very unusual location. It felt like a secret cinema society, and you wanted to be amongst like-minded people. So you loved to go to the cinema and other visions of the world that you could see than the one that you got on television.
So the other thing, Brian, is we speak about television striking back against video, but in other ways it's also complementary, because there were programs on at that time that perhaps encouraged people to go out and rent or to buy videos, or even to tape films off the TV that they saw. So I'm thinking of instance for the film program then presented by Barry Norman. I mean, we've watched an archive clip of him talking about the rise of video in the 1990s, and he had a series of video recommendations based on what was available to rent that week. And then also Moviedrome, initially with Alex Cox, but then later with Mark Cousins. Was that something that you would have watched back in the 1980s and 90s?
Yeah, there was no doubt that, television became an educator, became a curator of film titles, and that greatly expanded your knowledge, and we broadened our horizons with all this great cinema there was that we could watch on video.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like the rise of home video forced these television companies to expand and diversify what they were showing.
I mean, obviously television was concerned about losing audiences. They didn't want people to switch off and watch videos. They wanted people to watch television. And maybe what it did was make television better. It actually made television, who had a monopoly, for so many years, maybe it just forced them into diversifying and becoming more dynamic, and by pushing boundaries and just becoming a better product, and I think that was a good thing. But in terms of cinema, I mean, cinema was disturbed by the arrival of television in the 1950s and 60s. So all of a sudden, it has the arrival of video. And this threat of people staying at home. I mean, this was This was a genuine threat to the cinema industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in the context of Northern Ireland, across the UK and Ireland, cinema admissions had been, in free fall basically throughout the 60s and 70s for some of the reasons you've just outlined. But then in Northern Ireland as well, you have the troubles, the fact that people don't want to go out anymore. And as we've kind of spoke a little bit before, was video the armchair answer to the troubles? Yes, in part because people did not want to go out to the cinema. It didn't have the glamour, it didn't have the allure that it once had. A lot of the cinemas had fallen into disrepair. They just weren't as nice a place to go to as they had been in previous decades. I mean, think about it like this. 1984 was the absolute nadir of UK cinema admissions up to that point. Only 54 million tickets were sold in 1984. It only went lower than that again during COVID, when people literally could not go to the cinema for most of the year.
But 1984 is right in the middle of the video boom. So at that moment, with cinema sales falling and video booming, there must have been great concern. But also, the big studios saw an opportunity. They saw that actually maybe video is not a threat to the film industry, but actually a continuation of the film industry that can change the theatrical window to not just one box office, but maybe two box offices.
Yeah, it takes them a while to come around to this idea. As we've spoken before, E.T. came out in 1982, but then wasn't released on video till 1988. So before this time, the big film companies thought they would make more money from re-releasing these films in cinemas, but they were kind of forced to open up their catalogue onto video because they realised that this could form a substantial part of their revenue.
So the big studios formed home video divisions, and they would have special releases, and that opened, as you say, the catalogue onto video. But Sam, here's what I'm wondering is, did video do something else to cinema? Did video give cinema the boot up the arse that it needed to create a better presentation of itself, to attract an audience out of the house again?
Yes, in some ways. So firstly, it forced cinemas to think about their prices. So for instance, if you went to the ABC when it reopened in 1980, tickets were $1.85 for adults and £1 for children. So for a family of four, that's significantly more expensive than renting out a video for potentially $1.50 a night.
For the whole family? That's just $1.50.
Yeah. And then they reduced their prices in 1982, obviously as a response to what was happening with video. There's a really interesting article from 1981 called The Incredible Shrinking Cinema. So they talk to cinema exhibitors and ask basically, what are you doing in response to declining attendances and the video boom? So for instance, John Gaston from the Curzon Cinema, which is in South Belfast, they have decided then to split their cinema into 3 screens, like, if you remember from the last series, the ABC did. In one way, this is a bit of a downgrade because previously you had one large, beautiful Art Deco interior that's now been split into 3 smaller screens. So you may be getting less of a glamorous experience. But what you are getting is more choice. You get 3 options if you go to that cinema. So it allows cinemas to diversify their program. What the Curzon argues is that people will still want to come out and see films like Alien and Superman because they offer that spectacle that you can't get on video. That probably fits in with what we were talking about before. People pirated E.T. before they came out, but then they also might have gone to see it on the cinema because they wanted to see it on the big screen. They argue that cinema still holds an attraction for young people because they want to get out of the house, as they always have done. That's always been part of the appeal of cinema since it started at the beginning of the 20th century.
And Sam, you and I, we love cinemas and we love going to the cinema, so we would never downgrade the theatrical experience. But Sam, is video and the video boom responsible for the cinema multiplex, because without the boom of video and people staying at home, would multiplexes have happened, or is it just coincidence that they happened at the same time?
Well, I think you could argue it's a coincidence, but they certainly have to be responsive to the rise of video. The first multiplex cinema in the UK opens in Milton Keynes in 1985, and it takes until 1990 until Northern Ireland gets its first multiplex. And one of the reasons why it takes so long is that exhibitors don't want to invest in Northern Ireland for obvious reasons. But when it does come, the one thing it does do is it reflects the changing nature of audiences. So these, as we spoke about in the last series, these multiplex cinemas are often on the edge of the city. They have parking facilities for all the family. So they are better coped, I would say, to compete with the video boom.
And they also offer 10 films or more. What will we see tonight? Which film do you want to go to? There's more of a choice. And again, this is all part of the video boom. This idea that the choice is now the consumers.
Yeah, the other thing to say is that these two things weren't always in direct competition with each other. So, for instance, there's a local cinema chain towards the west of Northern Ireland called Ritz Cinemas. The owner of that, Columba Eastwood, also has a video shop in Cookstown. So basically it could be the same person kind of, operating the exhibition of films, whether that be on home video or cinema in a local area.
Sam, we have pressed pause on video to look at how cinema and television were striking back at this time. But I would say that, actually the three things bonded beautifully together. And when you think of the way the distribution chain worked from the 1980s well into the millennium, we would go and watch a film in the cinema, and then we'd rent it on video, and then we'd buy it on video, and then we'd watch it on television. There was a symmetry to all of that. It all seemed to work.
Yeah, I think the rise of home video really pushed cinemas to improve what they were offering, and the same with television to diversify its programming, particularly with the types of films that it showed on television.
Well, Sam, we're now going to press play on the next episode where we're going to the video shop. How exciting is that?
Thank you everyone for listening to Say Yes to VHS.
The music is by Score Draw.
The Wonder Cinema Video Shop
is now closed.